We will need a stick of butter, a cup of molasses, baking soda, half cup sugar, cinnamon, ginger, cloves, and of course a pinch of salt, flour, 1 egg, and 1 steaming hot cup of boiled water. Let's start by preheating the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and readying our baking tray. I love a good recipe for spice cake of any kind, but this one is very special. It's a family heirloom gingerbread cake recipe from one of our community members. Needless to say, I had to try it since gingerbread is one of my favorite things to make and to eat. From Donna. Tara, this is a truly fabulous picture of my grandmother Clara doll in her 1920s best. This photo is on a picture of her famous gingerbread cake with her butterscotch sauce. Seriously, this recipe is over 100 years old, and when she passed away, she was 98, all of us first cousins were upset because we could not find the recipe anywhere. Unbeknownst to us, my father had this lovely combination of photo and the recipe laminated, one for each of us. We got them as rolled up diplomas in our stockings. Please feel free to try this delicious 100-year-old recipe, and I hope you love it as much as we all do. But what makes this recipe really, really special is the sauce. This cake recipe also includes the instructions for a butterscotch sauce instead of icing, and as a longtime fan of sticky toffee pudding, I can always appreciate a cake with a lush sauce that just seeps into every crevice and makes a spicy cake that little more comforting on such a cold day. This cake is going to bake for 35 minutes, so while it rises to the occasion, let's talk a little history. First off, it's important to differentiate which gingerbread we're talking about. There are 2 main types of gingerbread, the snappy cookies or biscuits that we sometimes make houses or people out of, and then there's the fluffy gingerbread or spice cakes that we're making today. The cookies have a much longer, more drawn out history, but the gingerbread cake is fantastic because it's most likely an American original thanks to the addition of molasses, which was a cheap and widely accessible alternative to honey available during the 1600s and 1700s in North America. In fact, one of the oldest recipes for gingerbread cake shows up in Amelia Simmons' American Cookery in 1796, but it was most likely made regularly much earlier than that since ginger was already widely available from the start of European trade in the New World. The gingerbread cake and the other spice cakes, like clove cake, don't actually come from Germany, as you might expect, or have the same origins as gingerbread cookies at all. Instead, they most likely evolved from honey cake, which was developed in ancient Egypt, where beekeeping was a favorite pastime for thousands of years. The Washingtons were big fans of gingerbread cake. They even had their very own name for their family recipe, Gingerbread Lafayette, after the Marquis de Lafayette, who once ate this cake while dining at George Washington's mother's estate in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Likewise, the Roosevelts had their own beloved recipes for clove cake and spice cake. The addition of nutmeg in this recipe is an interesting one. I don't know much about butterscotch in general, but I'm pretty certain that I have never seen nutmeg in a butterscotch recipe before. And then heat it on medium heat, and then once it becomes thickened, then you will add the vanilla last. All right, the cake is done, and you can see that it is basically almost black. You know that if you've been around here for at least a little bit of time that I love blackstrap molasses, despite its bitterness. It is not for everyone. Feel free to substitute a lighter molasses for this cake. Gingerbread cakes are also relatively easy to make and pretty forgiving, as well as adaptable, as far as cake recipes go at least. So they were relatively popular desserts on the frontier and well into the 20th century. Their earliest versions also masked the smells and tastes of some of the more dubious rising agents, like fermented vegetable yeast, for example, or potash, which was a mixture of wood ash and lye that would sometimes be used before the invention of baking powder or baking soda was widely accepted. And this, of course, brings us up to Grandma Doll's recipe. By the time Grandma Doll developed her recipe at the beginning of the 20th century, baking powder and baking soda both were already common staples in most American households. Baking powder itself is a modern marvel in that it is widely considered to be the first chemical engineered specifically for enhancing food, opening up the floodgates for many other chemically enhanced foods that we now just take for granted, like, quote, naturally flavored waters, for example. All right, it's out of the oven. It's hot, and I just drizzled a lot of sauce on it. Are you ready to give it a try?
I sure am.
Do you even know what it is?
No.
It's a gingerbread cake with butterscotch sauce.
Oh, well, that sounds terrific.
Good, let's have some. So first thing, before you take a big bite,
Right.
I would like you to try just the sauce a little bit on its own first, okay?
That's the sort of drizzle, all right?
That's actually really good.
It is good. It sort of tastes like the innards of a gingerbread man, if you could... I'll just stop with that line of thought.
There's a lot of nutmeg in the sauce,
Yeah.
and that was a weird choice, I thought, but it tastes amazing. Time for the cake.
I'll tell you what, in the time since I've given up chocolate, I've been looking for that new kind of dessert that I can actually eat, and this is quite good. This is high up on the list, I'd say.
It does taste of gingerbread.
It does. It really does. I mean, that's what comes out. In fact, now that I think about it, when you laid it down in front of me, that is exactly what I smelled. I just couldn't place it initially.
I was afraid that when I made the sauce, that the sauce would just kind of drown out the taste, and especially since the sauce is so good, you could probably top lots of different desserts with it.
Oh, yeah.
But I was afraid that it would kind of overshadow the cake itself, but the cake is really good in its own right as well.
Yeah.
It's fluffy and it's moist.
As a well-known food connoisseur, might I just say that they complement each other?
Very well. Well, thank you very much, Donna, for this recipe, and Grandma Doll for creating it. Hey, it's Editing Tara. So I hope that this recipe warms and comforts you the same way that it does for me, especially on a cold day like today. Shout out to my Crafty Club members, specifically the senior members, who helped me to decide one of the first videos that were going to happen in this new year, and that was this one, which is a historic baking recipe. If you would like to help me to decide future videos or decide the future of Old Fashioned AF itself, then you can become a senior member yourself in the link below. As a thank you, members of the Crafty Club also got to watch this video a whole day before the rest of the internet. So that's another perk that you can look forward to at least once a month on the Crafty Club. Finally, be sure to give this recipe a thumbs up and then share this video with anybody who you think could use a little more sweet history in their life. And I will see you again for another video very soon. Bye!